I'm the president of College Transition Publishing and Veteran Transition Publishing, a new division of our company that's focused on helping transition or students and student veterans with the transition into and out of college. Today we're doing a program. We'll be visiting with two wonderful gentlemen during today's program. First is Nick Osborne, the interim director at the Center for Wounded Veterans in Higher Education at the University of Illinois in Urbana, Champaign, and then Dustin Lang, the Associate Health Postdoctorate Fellowship, is doing that at Edward Hines Jr. VA. But before I bring them on, I did want to remind everybody of a few things before we get started. I've muted all the phones on the program so that we won't have the interruptions and we can get right to the program. But we did add a Q&A box to the bottom of the screen, so be sure to take advantage of that as we're going through the program. Put your questions in there, and the three of us will do our best to make sure we answer all those throughout the program. But if we don't, we will ensure that one of us will follow up with you individually and address those for you. We have made this recorded version of the program so that you'll be able to get a copy of that afterwards, share it with your colleagues, revisit it, whatever you decide would be best use of the program. In addition, if we do bring up additional resources, other programs, white papers, links that are mentioned during the program, I'll be taking note of those and providing information about that to you in a separate email afterwards, so you'll have access to that information. So it looks like we have everything in order. So with that, I'll get started. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nicholas Osborne. How are you today?
Terry, it's an honor to be here, and I appreciate everyone who's joined us today. This is definitely a timely topic. Student veterans are growing. We see these numbers all across the board nationally, and I think it's a very unique population that also comes with it a lot of questions that we want to come together and figure out to best serve this group.
Perfect. I appreciate you joining us. And then Dustin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting and also organizing this, Terry. And also, as Nick stated, for everybody that's involved in listening today or watching today, we appreciate that you guys are here and that you do have the interest in the transitional needs of our veterans. So thanks again.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so I know you guys have been in the chain. You know, I've been communicating with a lot of the people that are on today's program and introducing them to you briefly, and which has probably generated a lot of their interest in participating in today's program. And in those events, I described your backgrounds, where you're going, and a little bit about what you're doing now. Certainly the stories are motivating, and I know a lot of people share similar experiences about leaving the military, transitioning into new roles, and then, in effect, serving the military just in a different capacity with helping student veterans with that transition. So I'd like to start with you, Nick. You know, if you could just briefly kind of go over, you know, share some of the highlights, because I know there's a lot of people on today's program that did not hear those stories. So if you could just talk about that transition out of the military and this, what the road, the path you took to get you where you are now and connect the two of us.
Absolutely. I spent about 8 years in the military, primarily in the Coast Guard, and I was also enlisted, and I served as an officer. I worked in intelligence and law enforcement, and I deployed for about a year to the Middle East in 06, 07. And I remember coming back to San Diego, and I was still on Middle Eastern time, and waking up on that, you know, we had been back for just several hours at that point, and I woke up by myself on base, and there was just this feeling of flatness, and what am I going to do with my life now? And I knew that at that point I was going to be leaving the military soon, and there was a lot of anxiety, to be quite truthful, around what is my new path, what is my new purpose. And shortly after leaving the military, I started on my doctorate at the University of California at Davis, and I also started working at the VA at the time, and working with a lot of young men and women and hearing about, as they left the military, that they were going through a very similar process, that there wasn't a lot of information, or the information they received in the military was just so much and it overwhelmed them. So I was hearing all these stories in addition to my own experience, and I eventually left the VA and I came here at the University of Illinois, again working with veterans. And it just really, I found myself in a pipeline, asking myself, how do we serve this group? It's a unique group. What are their needs? How do we mobilize our services? And that was one of the big things that kept coming up, was that there's a lack of resources out there, there's a lack of information, and there's a lot of questions.
Good. All right. Now, Dustin, I know you're almost a similar path, but you can talk about your transition when you left the Marines.
So yeah, I did 8 years in the Marines, as Terry just said there, and when I got out, I remember one of the first things I felt when I first got on college campus was, and I think a lot of veterans feel the same way, is when I got there, I just felt like an outlier right from the get-go. I just spent 8 years in a very diverse environment. I was obviously a little bit older, had different experiences, and at the time, I wasn't meeting, I think during my undergrad, I met under a handful of veterans the whole time. But part of my focus when I got out was, look, you only have 36 months to utilize the GI Bill, so I need to take school as serious as possible. And that's just what I did. I graduated in 2006, 3 years later, and ended up graduating with high honors, but there was one major thing that was missing from the picture. I had a degree, I had some experience, but I didn't have a job. And obviously, as I'm sure anybody can imagine, that put me in a very stressed out situation. I remember conversing with my brother, some of my professors, what am I going to do now? And one of the couple key themes, the first one was, just be patient, it'll all work out. And I just recall thinking, yeah, go ahead, yeah. It's easy to say that on that side of it, but here I am, I'm the one living it right now. But fast forward a little bit, I had more conversations with some of the professors I took classes with during my undergrad, and they suggested, hey, you did do pretty well in undergrad, why don't you try to apply for grad school? So I did apply for grad school, but as everybody knows, you don't get accepted that day. It was probably about 3 months before I even heard back. And then I could start the following semester. So I had a little break there between, I shouldn't say little, I almost had almost a year off there between undergrad and starting graduate school. I was fortunate at the time. Yes, I didn't have a job where I was using my new degree, but I did pick up some part-time work restoring a Victorian home in the community for a family, and I had talked with them about my situation, and they said, you know what, work as many hours as you want until you find a job or you get into grad school. The work's here if you want to do that. So fortunately, I was able to do that. But another thing that happened in that time off between undergrad and graduate school is I started to get involved with some of the veteran service organizations in the community. For example, the VFW, the Marine Corps League, and the American Legion. I became a member of all three of them, saw what they were doing to make sure that some of the younger generation of veterans didn't have some of the same experiences that they did after Vietnam, or just to help out the younger veterans. So I ended up getting more involved with them, picking up leadership positions, and just getting more involved because I was seeing what they were doing not only on a national level with helping push legislation for the post-9/11 GI Bill, but also stuff that they did in the local communities, philanthropic fundraising for almost anything that a veteran might need, where if it's financial struggles, getting behind on bills, to honor guards for families of the deceased, and they were just doing an amalgamation of various things in the community, and I really thought that was important. I thought, I need to be doing more. All right, so at about the same time, I got into grad school, and it was time for me to focus on what is my area of study going to be. And at that point, in being involved with the veteran service organizations, I had decided that this is what I need to do, is to make sure that the younger veterans coming through after me didn't have those same transitional experiences that I had gone through. My main focus was just to go through school. I applied for jobs those last 6 months, but I should have been. This is something that I should have been thinking at, almost as soon as I went into college. And from there, that's been really my driving force that has gotten me through my master's and into the doctorate's program and graduating with that, and now in my assistance with this book and the work that I did with Nick at the Wounded Veterans Center on campus at Illinois, and now with my postdoc that I'm just started at the VA.
Good. That's awesome. I appreciate you guys sharing those stories. And I'm sure a lot of people in the audience are hearing similar stories or maybe experience similar things themselves. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'll go back to you, Nick. One of the parts of the story, too, is how we connected and got this process started. And remember it, too, it was a couple of years ago. It was a first-year experience conference. It was in San Diego. And I had a booth and had my products out there, and you came up and said, "Hey, do you have anything for veterans, student veterans?" You remember what I said?
I remember a lot about that trip, Terry. Part of what I remember was when I flew out of Illinois, it was 2 degrees, and when I landed in San Diego, it was 70. And I remember I was walking around the different vendors' booths, and I was looking for resources for veterans, and I couldn't find any. And I remember talking with you, and I remember you telling me, this is something that you're interested in. And that also, if I remember correctly, we also talked about the different types of resources that we think are important. So I remember having that conversation with you and just knowing that something needs to move forward here for sure.
Yeah, correct. And then I remember my first initial reaction was just like, well, we kind of stay away from the niche markets. We're looking for bigger audiences, and I remember you following up later when we connected, and you're like, you kind of chuckle and says, really not quite a niche, and let me show you some stats, and shared some of the resources with me, and I was like, wow,
yeah,
look at this audience, and it's only projected to get larger.
That's true.
And then hearing your story about the needs, right, that this audience needs. And are not available. I mean, you mentioned yourself, you went around this entire conference focused on college success, and there wasn't anything there.
And I think what I appreciated about our conversation, Terry, was that we didn't only talk about the students themselves, but we also recognize that there's all these folks on campuses, from the community colleges to online to your brick and mortar to your four-year schools, who are saying, look, I'm finding student veterans coming into my office. I'm not a veteran. I don't really know this group. And so what I appreciated was that our conversation wasn't just geared on the students, but really how do we help the people who are helping the student veterans?
Correct. Now, and I remember as we went along, it was, and you said, I said, hey, this is great information. Let's make something for this audience and the people who serve them. And I proposed it to you, and I said, oh, great, and you were happy, and you're like, this is awesome. I'm glad you guys are going to proceed that path. And I said, well, but I want you to be part of it and have you help me write it,
Right.
And it took a little strong arming, but you came around, and
right.
and part of the criteria was that you said, look, the student audience is the end reader, but we need to help the people who are serving them on campus, right? The ones that are getting that may not work with that audience, on a daily basis. How can they be engaged, informed, etc.? So we went through that process, and luckily you said yes, and I believe we got a copy of the book, This Life During College. Hopefully everybody in the audience has picked up a copy of it, but last year we introduced that in February, and fortunately, it's been one of our best book launches yet. So kudos to you on that. Now, I know you work with, on your own campus. You've taught the course over the conference season last year. You've interacted with a lot of people as well, people who are using it, or just like you said, coming to us and saying, I've been tasked by the president of the campus to implement a veterans program. I don't know what to do. Several people have used the book. What's been the response?
It's surprising to me that I got so many emails from people, but I also, when I actually got to meet in person with people, from students, but folks that work on campuses, who just said, we've been waiting for something like this. And for students that said, it's really written in a language that I understand. I feel that you really took time, and that you know the military culture, the university culture. So the word that kept coming up was that it was just really authentic, and I feel it's comprehensive, and it really touches on the complexity but also the layers of this population. So the feedback I've received has just been very, very overwhelmingly positive. And I think that there's a lot of ways that I'm seeing it used too, from like a transition course, for example, that I teach. But then there's also schools that are just buying a bundle and they're giving them out to new student veterans who are on campus for the first time. So it's also cool to see how different schools are responding and using the book in their own way.
Yeah. And I agree. I mean, just from my conversations, speaking at various conferences and having the people come up and following up with them throughout the year, I mean, I'll have numerous customers that are buying 5 or 10 copies, for example, and just having them in the Veterans Resource Center, for people to come look at. And in some cases, that Vet Resource Center is a small table outside the advisor's, office. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's a much larger facility. But the fact that they have them there and they can check them out, read them. But then I have other schools that are buying it for every single one of their students once they come on campus. So the gamut's out there, and there's certainly, we'll get into that later, but there's all kinds of opportunities on how to get those books available and even have other people pay for them, which is awesome. So now, I know going to the conferences, one of the things we've hit on a couple times is that, a lot of people in this area that are serving student veterans, they're very motivated, they're very excited, and they want to help, but they're also faced with all these daunting challenges, as you guys know. Limited budgets, if any, right? Don't have an FYE course, a first year experience course. They don't have an orientation program. They don't have anything. They've just been tasked with, we have to do something for our veterans. Get going, and here's no money to do it, right? When you think about that group and that audience, because I know, like Nick, you've been kind of in that situation before too. What's your advice? What kind of tips would you give those people in that situation as they're moving forward? What things can they start off with? What things can you see them doing to be of the most assistance immediately on their campus?
Well, funnily enough, or ironically enough, Terry, you've got 2 people on here who live in Illinois, so that says a lot right there about our financial situation. But I think that schools are at different intervals with how they're working with student veterans. Some have dedicated buildings and spaces and lounges, but then there's others who are just now starting off, and they're working on putting things together like an advisory committee, or they're asking questions like, how do we identify our veterans? And so just starting right there as a foundation, I would say the most important thing to do is to know who your student veterans are. And you can do that by working with your registrar's office, your admissions office, and then the other part you want to do is you want to involve student veterans in the process. So, for example, putting together an advisory committee with different liaisons from the Career Center or the Disability Center, from admissions and stuff like that, and then bringing student veterans into the fold and really outlining what it is you want to accomplish as a committee. So, for example, this is what we want to accomplish in this first semester. This is what we want to accomplish by the end of year 1. But I think that you have to bring in a real diverse group in order to have that. So I would at the very least start with bringing in these different players from campus, streamlining and strategizing, and bringing student veterans in on the process.
Great. And Dustin, I know you, from a student's perspective and time over there, what's your thoughts? I mean, can you give us some feedback on, from your experience in it, working in it, and, advancing in it yourself? What would you offer as tips to someone that's been tasked with this on a campus? Say, get something going.
Yeah, as Nick pointed out, the biggest thing is to focus on getting the veterans on campus involved. Once you have them, you can start doing focus groups, you can start doing surveys, and find out what specific needs do they actually have. And once you get a committee started, like he's saying, you're going to notice that a lot of the needs that the students are asking for or needing, the campuses already provide these. It's just that you need to get these people together and then have them start tailoring their services for the specific population, and to have that veterans lens to get them involved with it.
Great.
And Terry, I'd just like to kind of give an example of what Dustin's saying, that you could say we have a career services office. So maybe for year 1, our goal is to send 2 staff members through training so they learn more about military culture, the types of questions and career issues that military students are looking for, and then starting to brand what it is that you're already doing just tweak it a little bit for the military audience.
Okay, good. It's good advice. I know the one thing that's also a good point, regarding budgets, and I know it was about mid-year last year you brought up this idea, Nick, was working with outside organizations that serve veterans, like the American Legion, or like Dustin's reference to the Marine Corps League, and other organizations out there. But I know locally, I've gotten several payments from American Legion saying, "Hey, we'd like to buy some books. Can you send it to this, veteran center on this campus?" So there are groups outside the university that you can leverage, not only just for purchasing products from us, but for any kind of activity that you're planning on your campus to engage and help your veteran students succeed. Talk to those groups in your community.
I think that's right on the money. They become investors in the program, in the model, and we've done things like kickoffs and orientations from our students where community veterans show up, and they're also oftentimes very generous in terms of how can we help you? Is there a fundraising initiative that we can do? And I think that, again, building in relationships with those community partners are a great starting point.
Good.
And I'd like to jump in there too, Terry, is with these veteran service organizations like the VFW, the American Legion, and the Marine Corps League, and Disabled American Veterans, all of these groups have what is known as a veteran service officer. So the veteran service organizations also have a veteran service officer that's from their organization, but also works with the VA to help streamline some of the benefits, or just some of the veterans are needing some healthcare through the VA system, but they don't really understand the system, the VA system, how to get involved. These are point of contacts that they can go to these veteran service organizations and talk to these officers there, and they can put them in connect with people at the VA that can help streamline this process for them. But they really are instrumental in getting not only the assistance that veterans are going to need on campus, but especially outside in their communities, and especially at their VAs.
Yeah, good information. Thank you. Yeah, I got a question here I want to bring up at this point from the audience. Looks like the question is, about starting off a program. This person's getting ready to kick off a program this fall, working on a lot of different avenues. You mentioned starting a new program. What things are you looking at to determine if what you're doing on campus is actually working? What's your measure for success?
That's a great question. So we always want to figure out if what we're doing and the direction we're moving in is giving us the results that we anticipate. So we use a survey every semester that our student veterans help us craft. And what it does is it tells us more about what their experiences are like on campus. And then what we also do is we do focus groups where we'll meet at least once a semester with usually groups of 6 to 8 veterans and find out. I try to always have a mix where we have veterans that are new to campus in their first year, veterans who have been here for a while, and then veterans in their senior year, and it's really assimilate as much information as we can.
Okay, good. I got another question here. This person, we're having challenging time identifying who the student veterans are on our campus. How do you identify veterans and start the process of working with them? Do you have feedback on that?
I think, Nick, you want to take this? I mean, I can answer, but I think you probably had more experience with this.
Sure. What we did is we noticed early on that we didn't have a question on our admissions application that asked if they were a veteran or currently serving in the National Guard or Reserve. So that's a big piece right there, is to try to get that as soon as possible on your app. And then once we have that information, what we would do is every semester we get a report of identified student veterans who have been admitted and who accepted their admission letter. And what it allows us to do at that point is to strike up a conversation and start the relationship. So we can start an email or a phone call or sometimes an in-person visit prior to their physical arrival on campus. So I would say getting with admissions and the registrar and really saying, how do we set up a system where we identify veterans and we can begin communicating with them as soon as possible would be a great first step.
Good. All right. We got another question here. Based on veterans you've worked with who've dropped out or ran into issues as students, what were the primary barriers that, if you were able to connect with them, or you feel that were barriers that they encountered that caused them to take that path?
I think some of the financial struggles that they're getting into and part of that is just not having enough education on how to budget everything. And I haven't seen people drop out, but I've seen people that have gotten into trouble to where they've had to take a semester off, but they didn't quit completely. And they usually came back once they got some guidance from the people, organizations in the community and stuff to get them back on track, and
Okay.
also through the center on campus. So.
Good.
I've seen a couple of things. I call it the too much too soon syndrome, where again, looking at military culture, a lot of our students get here and they're highly motivated, and they say, I'm going to take 19 credit hours, and half of them are math and science, and then they crash and burn a few weeks into the semester. So I think that unclear academic goals, so coming in and not really being sure what track they're on, not asking for help early on, which again is part of military culture, to feel pressured or obligated to sort of figure it out on your own, which is a biggie. Some students, because they haven't been students since high school, there's been a gap, and so their skills have become a bit rusty, so they really haven't had time to build an academic foundation. And then I'd say the last piece are, again, we're talking about non-traditional learners here, so they may be married, they may have dependents, they may be working, so it's balancing all of these other commitments while going to school as a student.
Yeah, and certainly, as Dustin said, the financial side's a big piece of that too, right? Dustin, I have a question for you. We just finished writing your book together, and I got a piece of paper that shows the cover because I had to give away my only copy I had on it, but this is what it looks like. It's called Camo to Career, the Veteran's Guide to Career Success. So it's about focusing on the transition of a student veteran into their new career. Earlier you told us your story, so tell us what led you to come to the connection and write this book.
Well, the biggest thing I would say is just my own personal experiences, my own personal problems, what I ended up deciding as my path into grad school that put me down to looking through at the different transitional problems that veterans are having. But the biggest one at the end of their college career is not being able to find a job. So when I had met Nick through working at the center, he had talked about this book that he had done with you before. He said that you guys were wanting to focus on one that was more on the career development, career side of the transition for the veterans. And he asked if I would be interested, and I jumped on the opportunity. It was just a great opportunity. This is something that I have a deep passion for. You look at the 5 major transitional problems that veterans are having. The first one is not being able to find a job, being able to navigate the VA system, getting acclimated to civilian society. These are all things that I went through myself. I see other veterans go through. I know they're important. Fourth one, financial struggles. And then also, which is Chapter 2 covers on, is translating your military skills into skills that civilian industry leaders can recognize. This is another transitional need that we're seeing with the veterans, which obviously causes the problem of not being able to find that career, to get that career.
So Nick came to you and said, hey, we're working on this book. Would you be interested?
Well, I actually came to Nick after I had finished up my degree, and I was waiting for this to start date on this postdoc. And I said, I'm in this position right now. I see you just opened the center. I'm obviously a veteran. I'm passionate about veterans. Is there anything that I could do to help out? And he talked about the academic and career services, and he knew I had some experience working as an academic coach for our Division of Rehabilitation Educational Services. And so he asked if I would be interested, and I said yes. And it was obviously what I needed in that temporary timeline. And then just we had started having conversations about past things that he's done with veterans, the work he's done. He brought up his book, and then obviously brought up the second book that you guys originally were planning to do on the Camo to Career, and asked if I would have any interest. And like I said, that was right down my alley. I jumped on it, and here we are.
Good. I'm glad you did, because as I mentioned, I put it on, as soon as I put it on the website, even before we printed copies of it, and then put it on the website, like the next day I got an order from it. I haven't even marketed it, right? Someone went to the site and just like bought a couple other ones and added that one on. And it just shows the proof of the value, just even looking at the cover, the importance of that topic. And since I've been working with customers at veteran centers on campus in the career centers office or career services office, but interesting enough, I've gotten clients from off campus, so career coaches, regional VSOs, veteran service offices, or organizations, and even individuals. So I'm curious, why do you think those organizations are so interested in this book?
Well, I think it really goes back down to what are those 5 transitional needs of the veterans coming back right now, or the 5 biggest problems they're having with transitioning. And as a society, you got these outside organizations outside of college campuses that, the society really wants to make sure that we do better for the veterans coming out of these wars than they did from Vietnam, is a perspective that I'm taking from it. And so you're seeing a lot of support from community organizations, community career centers, either whether it's through the state or what it could be, but they know about these transitional needs, but they need resources. And I think when they saw this book, that this is a great resource that can not only help them with finding out what these needs are, but some of the strategies for helping the veterans. So personally, I think that's probably why they saw the book and said, hey, this might be useful for us. So.
Good. Well, another question along that line is, how do you envision the book being used? Because, like Nick's book, it fits into a, orientation or first-year experience class or something like that. But, do you envision this one being what someone just hands it out, or does it need to be around a class environment or a weekend function, or how do you envision it being used?
I envision this being used multifaceted in different ways, from veteran transition courses like Nick is doing on campus, whether it's just a first day orientation, freshman orientation, or transfer orientation, where they could be handed out. The career centers could be handed out. But what I would really like to see happen with this book is that we get them to the veterans as early as possible. And what I'm saying there is, to do that, why not get it to them before they get out of the military? And the military has their transitional assistance program that covers certain things, but there's a lot of information that's thrown in a week. And if this could get to the veterans, say, a year before they get out or are planning to get out, they could start thinking about a lot of the tips that we're giving in this book, and things that they can do, connections that they can build back home through networking and so forth. So really, I would like to see it get utilized in that way if possible. But obviously, courses like Nick's on campus are a perfect avenue for them. Different career centers, both on campus and off campus, it can be utilized. So.
Good. What about you, Nick? You have any suggestions other than that?
I agree real strongly with what Dustin said, and especially about how, I've been in correspondence with DOD and high-ranking generals about the transition, and it's something that I think needs to start a minimum of 6 months before the service member leaves. And career is always a part of that conversation. If they're leaving the military, regardless whether or not they're going to school, they're looking for a new career. Oftentimes the motivation to go to school and to get a degree is to get a career. And so we constantly have the career theme throughout the conversation of a military transition. But I think that what happens is it operates in a vacuum, in the sense that it needs to come together as a holistic plan. And what I mean by that is that when you start talking about academic advising, part of what you're also teasing out is, what do you want to do when you graduate? So how are we going to be intentional now with these 4 years on campus to lead you into the career that you want to be in? And that's really the framework that I used in my contribution here, and I know that we all wanted to make sure was here in this book, is that this isn't something of just fragmented pieces. This really discusses the layers and the thought process of what's going through the service member and the veteran's mind, and how to maximize your time on campus, how to maximize those resources on your campus at the state level, at the federal level, so that you actually get that career that you envision for yourself.
Good. Now, Dustin, one of the things that I know was important when Nick and I were first talking about starting a collaboration on a book was, the additional resources, supplements to supplement even if someone didn't buy our products, something that will help them succeed in their role. And I know that was an important factor for you too. In fact, you're completing a white paper right now. It's titled Leveraging Your Military Experience. Can you describe that? What's going to be in that paper?
Yeah, so this first white paper is really going to just narrow in on how veterans can translate their skills that they picked up during the military, whether it was through their day-to-day work, their professional development training they had, to different military specialized schools, to non-commissioned officers courses, and so forth. How they can, first of all, utilize that material that they have from the military to think about, one, what are these skills, but then two, to also translate them into the skills that not only are industry leaders wanting, but the skills that veterans have picked up, but also to translate those skills, those soft skills, into the specific terms that the industry leaders are looking for. It will also have resource for just different online websites that they can go to that will directly translate these some of the terminology for them if needed.
So you see, it's not only just for the students, it's also for people who are guiding them to use it as almost a training tool for them as well. The service. Good. And Nick, you're working on one as well. Yours is titled Your New Mission, Your Career. What's the focus on that?
To really address I'm leaving the military or I'm out, where do I go now? And who are my supporters? How do I put all of this together, and how am I intentional with it? And it's everything from getting them to think about what it is that they want to do, how to maximize their time on campus, so key resources, different types of instruments or batteries that can help them start to isolate where they have natural aptitude, where they have interest, and then how they can start to build off of that. And I think that also, as Dustin alluded to, that really talking about that this is a group that brings a lot of experience. I mean, this is, even if they're in their 20s, veterans are bringing sometimes multiple deployments, areas of responsibility that are just very unique. And so we want to pull all of this good stuff out of them, and we want to teach them, this is how I put this on a resume so a civilian employer understands the factor. This is how I write a cover letter that's going to stand out when there's 500 other applicants. So these are the things that we go into in the white paper, and then I also go into just very tangible basics like the importance of an internship, or the importance of following up with a thank you note after an interview, as well as campus-based state and federal resources.
Great, awesome. I'm anxious to see them, and I know the audience members already got a few postings here. How can I get a copy? Blah blah blah. So once those are wrapped up, I'm going to have those available, and I'll be sending everybody on this email, or excuse me, this webcast, a link to where they can download those. So I appreciate you guys putting those together and offering that to our audience members as well. We've got a few other questions here directed to Dustin. What was your greatest dilemma with transitioning from military to college?
I would say not having the resources available. This is when I got out. My big focus was, I got 3 years to get this degree, And so my main focused on my classes and doing well in my classes. And before I knew it, I was getting ready to graduate and I didn't have a job. It would have been nice to have a resource like this book that we just put together, like Nick's book, his first book. It would have been nice to have that before I got out of the military or right when I got out of the military, so that I could have started planning for some of this stuff as I was taking classes every semester. And just the student groups that are now involved, the Student Veterans of America have done a great job nationally getting chartered organizations, registered student organizations on various campuses throughout the United States. That was something that just when I got out in '03, that wasn't happening, and so I didn't have that opportunity to connect with various veterans on campus until I really got involved with the VFW and the Marine Corps League and so forth. So those probably be the top two.
Okay.
Transition.
Good, thank you. I see a couple other questions. In fact, there's several about the books. How do we learn more about these books, which is great. I appreciate people's interest in them, and I'll go ahead and address that. Questions about where you can buy samples, things like that. So I showed copies of these earlier, and I know some people who had gone to like NASPA's Vet Symposium or the FYE, things like that, or Innovations had gotten copies that I was handing out at those events, but the books retail for $38.95. And certainly when you're working with a campus bookstore or if the program is buying them in bulk, we have tiered programs where you can buy them and they drop off dramatically once you start buying in quantities of 10 or 15 or 20 more. But today we're offering everybody who's on this, if you did not get a copy at one of these recent conferences, I want to put it up here on the website or on the side here. You can get one of these downloaded for free. So there's a link up here that you can click on. Just click on either one of the books that you're more interested in, and we'll send you a downloadable PDF version of the book so that you can review that and get that access for free. If you are interested and want a hard copy, including shipping and handling, this is $15, and there's going to be, once you fill out the little form, it'll tell you how to get that as well. So there's more than 20-some chapters, over 20 chapters of content in this little book. The content is easy to read, is presented in a great format that is not intimidating, and that's usually that's our biggest feedback we get from clients, is that it's so easy to read. You can go through 4 or 5 chapters in less than an hour, and you're getting all this great information that's available. So I encourage you, please take advantage of it. Get the download version, look it over. If that's all you can get, at least that's something to start with. So take advantage of that. Some other questions I have here for you guys that are coming up. We've been working with veterans for several years on our campus, but we're still having a low turnout at our events. What are some activities or ways we can bring groups of veterans together in a meaningful way? You want to take that, Nick?
That's a national question that we're all we're all sitting with at conferences and sharing information. Again, this is where I think that every campus needs to really understand its climate, and the best way you're going to do that is by having a very strong, healthy relationship with your student veterans community. It could be something as simple as the time of the event. Is it a time that's conflicting with other responsibilities? Or is it a time where a lot of students are in class? So that's where a survey would be helpful. Again, having some designated student veteran leaders that are part of the advisory committee or that you're just touching base with often, they're going to give the most candid feedback about what type of venue they want, where it should be held, as well as time.
Great. Good information. Thank you. Another question, have either of you developed any surveys or assessment tools that have worked well with the student veterans you're serving? Either one of you?
Yeah, I've actually put together one last semester that was a 44 question, and out of about 400 veterans, we had 115 respond, which was quite high. So we do this every semester. I would say surveys and focus groups, if we can be of service, helping others identified the types of questions that should be in there and how to structure something like that. That could be a webinar in itself, or that could be a follow-on conversation I'd be happy to assist with.
Okay. And I'm seeing a lot of people like, can I get a copy? Can I get a copy? So
Yeah.
Would that be available? Okay, good. I'll make sure I get that out to everybody as well. The other question we have here, are either of you or both available to help us develop our program on campus? Is that something that you guys are available to do? Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working with schools from community colleges to online to just your brick and mortar public universities, and I'm happy to do that. There's different types of ways that we help them. So for more information, definitely reach out, and I'd like to know more specifically how I can help your own individual school.
Great. And Dustin, how about you? Would that something you're...
I would definitely be available, and as Nick stated, just let us know what you're looking for, or some of the problems that you might be running into, or just questions that you might have, or how general it is or not. Just let us know what it is, and we can definitely get back with you and try to help out as much as we can. So.
Great. And I know, just based working with both of you over the last year and two, the focus on providing these resources, and we just recently launched this year the division of our company focused just on student veteran components. So it's called Veteran Transition Publishing. We have a website, veterantransitionpublishing.com. Our goal right now, it has some basic information on there, but it's going to have copies of this webinar. It's going to have your white papers. It's going to have a Q&A section in it. So our goal is to develop that over this next year, to be a sounding board for people to go post best practices. And people in the audience today, if you have and you're experiencing, you're doing something on your campus that's working really well, share it, please. Share it with me. We can do a little blog on our post to get it out to thousands of people who are doing the same exact same thing that these two gentlemen are doing that could benefit from it. And so we want to be that bouncing board so that people can go there, instantly get information, and leverage our social media components to get the information out to thousands of people who are serving student veterans on their own campus. So please share that information with us, and we'll do our best to make sure that gets disseminated out there. It looks like we're kind of pushing on the hour close to here, so I want to wrap up with a couple questions, guys. This is a good one. What's next? What's next for both of you? Are you guys working on any other books, resources? I know we talked about the white papers, but Dustin, I'll start with you. What are you doing now? You mentioned this postdoc thing you're doing. What's that capacity, and are you looking at other projects related to writing books, etc.?
Yeah, so before I get started with this new position, or this new postdoc position, one of the things that me and Nick and another member on campus worked on was we submitted a journal article, peer-reviewed journal article, to the Journal of Post-Secondary Education for Disability. And if that gets accepted, that'll be out this summer. But that paper specifically focuses on a conceptual, student-centric, comprehensive model for different campuses, but depending on what their size is how they can set up or utilize this model, this conceptual model on campus for serving veterans. We've been working on that, and it focuses on the comprehensive side of pulling in your different student services organizations, whether it's at different academic services that the students might need, coaching, tutoring to disability services, career services, and then also Nick, if you want to jump in there.
Sure. I think that what we do is we talk about how, going back to the budget question earlier, is how do you mobilize existing offices on campus and bring them together and brand them for veterans? And we walk the reader through that process.
Okay, good. And so back to you, Dustin. So after that, other than the article, what's your projects you're working on?
So I just got started with the postdoc fellowship at the Center of Innovation for Complex Chronic Healthcare up at the VA, Edwards Hines Jr. VA up in the Chicago area. And some of the areas of research that we'll be focusing on are just conditions that people have complex chronic issues with, whether it's spinal cord injuries and some of the sequelae that goes along with that, the traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and so forth. And part of this experience for me is for me to get a better understanding of the VA system as a whole, and the system and how that works. And so this is a 2-year postdoc that I'll be working on various studies in that realm, and eventually I think I'm going to try to go back to the university systems and work with the veterans one-on-one.
Good, awesome. And you, Nick, I know you got a recent change in your roles and capacities this last year. What's up for you, project-wise?
Yeah, so I'm still working as the director of the Center for Wounded Veterans here, and then I had an article come out in About Campus about how to structure student-veteran discussion panels to educate the campus. And then I had another article come out last year called Veteran Ally, which really is rooted on how do you start an existing veterans program, what are the components, and there's also a lot of emphasis on faculty and staff training. And then I have the article that Dustin and I and another colleague worked on. And then I also have an article out right now specifically about the transition course. So I think that's going to be an exciting new area for me to go out on the road and share those pieces with others.
Good. And I know we talked about that in length recently about those projects, specifically about developing courses and programs. So audience members, be on the lookout. We're going to have some additional content on, and particularly a webinar first to start with, but additional resources available for that. As for the company, the Veteran Transition Publishing, as I mentioned, we're working on just gathering up resources and becoming a source for that. We have some other books we've recently produced that have veteran components to it. We have a book that's titled Life During Community College, Your Guide to Success. So it's really targeted to that community college audience, and but we've included a detailed chapter in there for student veterans in that community. The other one is Life During College, the Online Learner's Guide to Success. As audience members know, a large percentage of online learners are veterans, and we wanted to make sure we have resources for them. So this book is really targeted toward the entire online learning audience, but again, we included a chapter in that book detailing resources available in the community as well as through online campuses that are available for veterans. And then certainly if you have not connected with us on LinkedIn, 3 of us are active members of that. We have social media components too. We have a blog. So connect with us on our website and follow those resources. As we find different things, articles of interest inside and outside the company, we post those there. So use that as a resource for yourselves. So we'll wrap it up. I know we kind of went over a little bit of the time here, but I appreciate audience members sticking around, and this has all been good information. I hope you guys enjoy it as well. Nick, Dustin, I'll start with you, Nick. Any final comments, words of advice for the audience members?
3 points that I wish I had known when I was getting started. And the first is really hone in on the campus climate with how your student veterans perceive the campus. Sometimes they come in thinking that it could be possibly anti-military. Veterans have a tendency to isolate, so really figure out what they're coming in with and maintain that information. The other part is be aware of your own assumptions. Not every veteran has served in combat. In fact, most have not. There's a lot of emphasis on things like post-traumatic stress and brain injuries, which is important, but also veterans are very sensitive. If they start feeling that they're being sort of typecast into a category as being dangerous or mentally unhealthy. So really be mindful how you train your faculty and staff. And the last part is, for a lot of our viewers and participants, they may not be veterans themselves, and so they say, can I really offer anything? Absolutely yes. Veterans are assessing people who are competent, and that's really what they want in the end. So if you don't feel that you have tools right now, continue just like you're doing today with this webinar to develop more and more tools. And in the end, not being a veteran really is not a big deal.
Good points. Thank you. Dustin, anything else to add to the audience members?
Yeah, I just want to hone in on again is you got to get these veterans involved on your campus to find out what they need. You know, is the earlier you can do that, I think it's better not only for the your university or your community college, but the veterans themselves. Whatever tools that you have to assist these veterans with, the earlier you can do it, the better. So get the veterans involved and give them the information as soon as possible. And that would be my last 2 things.
Correct. Well, again, thank you both for participating and giving us this time off your schedules. I know it's hard sometimes breaking away from the normal day-to-day stuff to do things like this, so I appreciate giving us that time. I do want to let the audience members remind them, I left that link up on the window. Take advantage of these books. The download option's there. It's free. Take advantage of that and take advantage of the resources. I want to follow up in an email that we talked about through this. Even if you can't get them and buy them yourselves, or you don't have a class, I encourage you to have a link on your site, or at least get a reference to it, so that you can tell students that are coming in that are asking lots of the questions, say, hey, here's a great book, and send them our way. We'll take care of them on getting them the resources they need. And finally, just want to say thank you. We're going to have more additional information coming. I know there's a lot of questions here I didn't get to, and I apologize for that. But Dustin and Nick, I know you guys both agreed to assist with addressing some of these with me after today's program's finished up. But again, thank you for participating today, gentlemen, and thank you everybody else for joining us on this webcast. We wish you all the best, and thank you for serving your student veterans.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.